Hello, I'm Allen County Commissioner Ron Turpin, and I'm pleased to have this be our inaugural podcast of Talkin with Turpin, a podcast that we've set up to help inform you of issues going on throughout Allen County and Northeast Indiana that you would have an interest in. Today, I'm pleased to have as our inaugural guest, Allen County Sheriff Troy Hershberger. Troy, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me today.
So Troy, we're going to start all these up with really talking about people's backgrounds so that, our citizens get to know our elected officials better. So Troy, you've been the sheriff since January 1st of 2023, but you are certainly not a newbie to law enforcement. So give us a little bit about your background.
Oh, my background is really quite basic. Born and raised in Fort Wayne, went to high school, Bishop Dwenger High School, grew up in parochial schools. Coming out of college, I went to the first place that was hiring for police officers, and that was 1988. Got hired in November 1989, and this is the only job I've had since I was a 22-year-old kid.
So you've been with the county Sheriff's Department for 35, going on 36 years, right?
That is correct.
Yeah, I remember we gave Troy his 35th anniversary, pen just a couple of months ago, I think, right? So,
yes.
So what are some of the different roles you've had in the Sheriff's Department over the years?
Oh, wow, I have many. Back then, you started your career as a police officer coming in. You had to work the jail, so I cut my teeth in the jail and spent the first 7 years of my career there. That was working the blocks to running prisoners to court, prison, to doctor's appointments, to working intake, or what we called lockup back at the time, which was in a different part. It wasn't actually in the jail. It was in the basement of the Rousseau Center at that time. So I worked pretty much all aspects of the jail the first 7 years of my career. So I understood and got the basic knowledge of the inner workings of the jail. From there, I went out to patrol, and from patrol, I went to the investigative unit, back to patrol as a supervisor, and then back to the investigative unit as the investigation commander. So from there, I ended up at internal affairs, and then became part of the administration as a deputy chief to chief deputy, and then elected sheriff. So I've pretty much been through all aspects of the agency.
Okay. And as sheriff, give us it's an elected position, right?
Yes.
4-year term, and you can do how many terms?
2 terms.
Okay.
2 terms limited.
Okay. So unlike commissioner, which is 4 years also, but can be unlimited. So,
Yep.
So tell us, one of the reasons that I thought it'd be good to have you be our inaugural guest is that a lot of folks that are listening to this, seeing this, have, heard a lot about the new jail. And, Allen County, for years has talked about having a jail. I think our current one was built.
The initial tower was built in 1981, added on to in the mid-90s, and then early 2000s again.
So over 3 iterations. And if you walk through the jail, you kind of see it. You
Right.
can see clearly where the different parts of the jail have been added on and things like that. And we know that a federal judge a few years ago said that, our jail was not adequate, correct?
That is correct.
And so, prior commissioners to me and others have worked on kind of what a new plan is. A new jail's being built off of Meyer Road, and that's how many beds?
It'll be just a little bit under 1,400 permanent beds, 1,372, and then there'll be another 140 beds that aren't permanent sleeping, so like 100 in the intake and then 40 in the medical unit to put a little over 1,400 beds.
Okay. And something I think is always interesting that people don't think about is that people assume that, you've got, these 1,400 beds, we can have 1,400 inmates in there. And that's not the way the federal courts see that, is that?
No, that's correct. Of your permanent beds, they see capacity at 80% of those, so a little over 1,300 of those beds, take 80%, and that's where they decide or see as full capacity. So that's that arbitrary number.
So in that kind of mindset, if we think about it, once we build this new jail and it's supposed to be set for November of 2027, we know with all the prep work that has to happen, it probably wouldn't be till, early mid 2028 before we would actually live there. Knowing that really we can't get more than maybe 1,150 or so inmates in there before we would have a similar issue to now, right? Where we might have an overcrowding situation.
Hypothetically, the answer to that is yes, but not necessarily. It would take a lot of things to fall into place for that to happen. this is not the first federal lawsuit that we've had in my career. We had one back in the mid 90s, which is why we had to add on to the original 1981 structure. So with that, we also, there were some mistakes made, I think. Some of it I'm sure had to do for financial reasons, but some of those floors in that block that they added on to during that time were open dormitory concepts. So in other words, there's not interior doors and rooms, locked cells, so to speak. So that's not always a good thing. If you have problematic prisoners that want to act up, they don't always follow the rules. They don't follow the rules of life, which is why they end up in jail, right? So it just makes it harder for our staff to work in there.
Okay. So we talked about the current jail. What's the state of the current jail? I mean, you've taken me on a tour through there. I've been through there twice now, first with you and then with our maintenance people, because it is county maintenance officers that work with your staff really to keep the jail upkeep and all that. So what does the current status look like?
In some cases, it can be a hodgepodge situation. The 81 structure, or that portion of the building which holds about a third of the prisoner population, it's failing. We have pipes within concrete block walls that when prisoners plug toilets, they snake it. They're breaking the iron pipes within the structure, creating flooding and that kind of thing. And the only way to fix that is to tear into walls and move that inmate population. So the infrastructure, the bare bones of it, some of the plumbing, even the wiring, we can't pull any more wiring through the conduit within that structure. So it's met its life expectancy. But there are other portions of the building that are salvageable, and we'll have to take a look. What do we do with that? The last addition in the early 2000s. But when you have that population on a day-to-day basis that are doing whatever they can to help destroy it, it takes a toll on the building and structure. Plumbing especially, that's the biggest thing. The plumbing takes a beating daily.
And I think that's something that it's interesting for the public to think about, because the core of the jail is less than 50 years old. And some people are like, well, that doesn't seem that old. Why would we need to replace it? But it really is that daily wear and tear for people who are there who don't want to be there. So they're not really treating the building with respect. So it's getting beat up, really on a daily basis in a way that you do have a shorter life expectancy than when that happens.
That is correct. And with that comes the structure. Every time you add on to an existing structure, you're adding on in a different time with a different concept of what that original model was. So in theory, even though we're going to a larger jail that can increase our population, I actually can go into that newer jail with less workers than what our current jail really should have. And so you'll hear me talk about the word efficiency. That modern structure gets us the efficiency to maximize space with the least amount of staff to do it. And to put that into perspective, I should be over, in our last study of our workforce, we should be over a couple hundred people working in our current jail. I have 172 positions, and that is more than what we've ever had to work that building prior to that lawsuit. To put it into perspective to the new structure, our target workforce is 195.
Okay. So let's talk about that for a little bit, because the new jail is based on a pod system.
Correct.
And, these pods house how many inmates?
248 for 4 of them. The fifth one will be 236. The difference is it has to do with classification of prisoners, and that's just how we label the prisoner in what they're there for.
So I think on the pod, really, it's set up where it's almost hub and spoke, right? Where
Correct.
You've got the middle is where you would have your staff at, right? Looking at the monitors and all of that. And then what's the spoke look like?
That's where we break up the housing units. Right now we have housing units in our current structure with as many as 80 people to 100 people on each side. So the current structure, we have 13 posts. In the new structure, we'll have 5 in our general population housing units.
Okay. So we talked about efficiency and, what are some benefits the new jail will give you and your confinement officers?
The new jail, if you do the math, the 5 pods doesn't get us to about 1,400. There's the main part of the structure, the nuts and bolts of the structure, will have units that we can do programming in. There'll be 32 beds of that where we can carve out space for 32 people who want to buy into the evidence-based practices that the others, like say community corrections, does. It also allows us an infirmary of 40 beds, something we don't have currently. It also gives us what we call the special housing unit for prisoners that need special needs, and that will be as many as 46 beds to house not only men and women. Obviously, we can't mix sexes. So when we carve out a classification system, we got to do it for both sexes. So that gives us additional space in the beds, and that additional space, or the nuts and bolts, because we haven't even talked about the condition, the kitchen and the condition of our current kitchen, as to why we would need a new kitchen in the future building. So that is all laid out, the main structures, for up to 3,000 beds. So when we talk about efficiency, if we have to add on in the future, we're not adding on all HVAC and everything that comes with another floor, which is what we've had to do in our current system. We just add another pod. And with that, it's only enough HVAC for that pod, not an entire floor.
Yeah, the new jail, if you think about it, when you look at the map, it's almost like a Lego set.
Correct.
I mean, we're essentially, okay, if we need to add a pod at some point, you just add on, and it's set up in a way that you could do that. I mean, hopefully we don't have to, but it's set up to do it. So talking for a minute about, you talked about, special circumstances and people there, more often than I know you will get people that come in the jail that have mental illness of some kind. And your confinement officers really aren't trained in how to deal with that. How does this new jail help you in that situation?
It gives us the physical space, first off, to house them in one location. Currently, we don't have one special housing area, nor do we have the ability with a housing unit to hold an entire group of mentally ill or somebody with any kind of medical needs. So the modern structure, the new structure, gives us that ability to at least get them, regulate them, and then get them out to that general population. So we step it. And then I will be able to house it not only with my staff, but with our medical provider and their staff, and it makes it more efficient contractually for my medical provider, mental health provider to do their job. So they don't have to go crisscross the jail where we are housing people currently to holding them in one spot for them. So it'll make their jobs easier as well.
You talked a little bit about the kitchen facilities, and I've been with you to see the current ones we have down in the basement of the current jail. And, your folks are cooking, 700 plus meals a day, 3 times a day, right, for the population that's there. How does this new jail make their life easier?
It'll make it modern. What we have currently is a situation where we run into some plumbing issues. This kitchen, the way it was designed, is actually in the middle of the building, which isn't ideal. But that's what happens when you add on, like you referred to, that Lego set. Wasn't ideal, but it's what worked for the plan at the time. That kitchen was actually moved from the original location because the space wasn't big enough. That's why it went to where it did in the interior of the building, for the reason of space, but it's not efficient at all. And we're having some issues now, specifically when I talk about the plumbing. So that modern structure gets us, it's laid out for 3,000 beds of the future, even though we only need it for 1,400 at some point, right? So, but it's also on the exterior of the jail proper. So if we ever needed to, say, fix a drain, we're only going through a wall as opposed to 300 feet plus through concrete floors. So it's little things like that. And when you talk about a kitchen for a jail, it's no different. I mean, it's a kitchen the size of what you would have in a hotel or an event center, and it comes with all that expense of that equipment.
Yeah. Well, with one difference is that usually a hotel or event center, employees are probably going to take better care of the equipment than maybe your trustees might. In your kitchen, right?
Correct.
So,
it's the prisoner staff that cooks, that uses it, with the oversight of our contractual food provider, who does a good job. But I would envision with our staff, though, we will now have staff interacting because of the efficiency that we're able to save with in our housing units. That now we can staff with officers of those positions that we didn't typically do that. Rather than walking through, we'll have somebody there watching.
Right. So pivoting from the jail a little bit. So right now we've got around 700 or so inmates in the current jail that we have. How many of those are for DOC transfer?
Today was 108.
Okay. Yeah, I don't think most people realize, your normal assumption is that, you have someone who gets sentenced, for a felony, and the judge says you have to go to the Department of Correction for 10 years, right? Most citizens would assume that, okay, that person immediately, the movies shows they're immediately taken away to prison and that's it. That's not how this really works in real life, is it?
No. We're at the mercy of the Department of Corrections. The way it works is they all get transferred to the Reception Diagnostic Center, which is in Plainfield, Indiana. The state prison system only has so many beds a week, and as such, Allen County is designated so many beds a week. So we do our hardest to try to get additional beds as they become available, and my staff does an awesome job in trying to obtain those beds. But we're allowed to transfer only so many prisoners on a weekly basis. So in some cases, when you're only sending 14 people a week and they're having 14 or 15 or 20 sentenced in a week, we're always behind. So right now we're in a good spot where I've worked hard and we're getting more beds to the prison, so we're getting people out, but it's being backfilled by those getting sentenced.
Yeah, but it's an issue for us, right? Because this is one of the issues that's led us to overcrowding in our jail. The other thing that you and I have talked before about is, the state, if there's a certain number of days that they haven't picked up the prisoner by that date, they owe us a reimbursement for us housing that person. And I think it's around $40 a day right now.
It's $37 a day is what they $37.50 a day is what they reimburse us, and it starts after we're holding them after the 5th day.
Right, but we know that our cost is actually higher than that.
Sure it is.
And so what people don't realize is that is a cost to the general budget of Allen County. So the taxpayers of Allen County are paying that differential. Every day that inmate is there, they're paying it. And I think right now the state's not paid us since October, November, something like that.
It's been a while, and they're not going to because they don't have any money. The Department of Corrections is out of their money and won't have it until the new budget July 1st. And I don't know the exact figure, but the last I knew that it was 6 digits.
Right. Yeah. I think the last I saw it was north of 300,000, which
that could be accurate.
It's something I've talked with the state about as well, which is, that's something that's a state responsibility that has fallen on us because we still have to house and feed and all of that until they come in. But it's just one more thing on your plate that affects all of us as taxpayers that,
That is correct. It's the state's way to save on their budget and push it to our local budget because, as you said, they're reimbursing at $37.50 a day, and the costs are really more than that. There's really not much of an incentive for them to get the people if they can pay us less money than what it costs to house them to begin with in the Department of Corrections.
So as you kind of look, we talked about the jail, we talked about some of the challenges. What are some of the best parts about being sheriff?
Oh, there's a lot of good things about being sheriff because it's a challenge. Every day it's a challenge. I knew what I was getting into. I've always been goal-oriented and met the goal that I set out for myself early in my career. The best things are our people. They work hard, sometimes in a thankless job, especially our jail staff. They basically are the people that make the sheriff's department work. And, they didn't sign up for it for a huge paycheck. They make good money at what they do. They could always make better money, but they work hard for that money that they earn.
And so what are some of the biggest challenges that you have right now as sheriff?
Oh, every day is a challenge. You never know what's going to happen. You have to prepare yourself mentally for any bad event that may occur, whether that be civil unrest to, what a catastrophe that we could have on a natural disaster to any problems that we have within the jail. So you always got to be prepared. The biggest challenge I have is making sure we're prepared for the next event that could happen.
Yeah. Yeah, I know earlier this week, one of the things as commissioner is I chair our Homeland Security Task Force, right? Which
Yep.
you're a member of. We also have the different fire areas as well as the Fort Wayne City Police and a number of other things there. So it is that preparedness for, there will be, natural disasters. There will be things that events that happen. And, your department's a key part of that. One of the other challenges I see that your department has is Allen County is the biggest geographic county in the state of Indiana, 660 square miles, and your guys have to be out there patrolling that pretty much every day, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So just the logistics of trying to, figure all that out certainly is a challenge. So you are 2 years into your 4-year term. What kind of initiatives do you want to accomplish over these next 2 years? And then really, God willing, the next 6 years, that you've got.
Well, what I saw initially coming into office was tackling the whole jail issue, and that is moving forward. My next move is what I want to see is technology. We've done a little bit with that, but there's more that we can do. Technology obviously costs money, so we're going to have to find creative ways as to how we can move forward with technology and how we're going to pay for it. Just for an example, AI. AI is something I don't truly fully understand. I understand its usefulness, though. So it's something that I would like to look at and explore. There's other things, though. Flock cameras, as an example, would be another for crime deterrence and crime identification in some cases. So how do we get those things as examples implemented and paid for? I've done some technology inside the jail to help our staff in watching prisoners and ensure prisoners are checked on in a timely manner, because when we have the problematic people within the jail, we have to ensure that they're watched and it's recorded. So we had the old-fashioned way: go watch it, record it, hand write it on a form, and we kept all these forms. So this now allows us to do it electronically. We still have to visually do the check, but it gets electronically covered, recorded, so it's at the exact time.
Okay. I think one last thing is a lot of people don't realize that how many community resource officers do you have on your staff?
The community resource officers are those officers assigned to the towns. We currently have 2 in Huntertown, 1 in Monroeville, and 1 in Leo, Cedarville, and Grable. Huntertown would like to add a 3rd. We're in the process of doing that, and that is something I would like to get accomplished before the end of this year.
Yeah. And then you also have school resource officers too, as well, right? And I know that's one where it's a partnership between your department and those school corporations. I know East Allen does, Northwest Allen does. I think Canterbury, is that right?
That's correct. And Southwest Allen as well.
Yeah, Southwest. And I know from my time as a school board member in East Allen, those officers in those high schools really become part of the fabric of that school.
Absolutely.
Students know that that's someone they can go to if they're in an emergency situation. Those officers, get pretty close with the students there because they're seen as a trusted source. And they're also, the benefit is that they can trust the police.
Right.
That it's not, a number of our schools, they may not come in with that perspective. So this is a great way for us to build those relationships.
Absolutely. I have 14 officers in the schools, 2 supervisors for a total of 16. Some people may argue, well, they should be out on the street. Well, my response to that is you have no idea how often we are in the school systems. They're not there for just a security guard role, even though they're there for a deterrent and they are there as a role as a police officer. But their role is much deeper, developing those relationships. So we've had officers that have been coaches. They teach classes. They become those mentors and hitting those kids at a time in high school where they're developing that relationship. And I can also utilize them as recruitment as well. Bringing them into the jail at 18 years old as workers. If they desire a career in law enforcement, we can then promote them up after they spend their time working in the jail to become police officers.
So great. Anything else you want to share with us, Sheriff, that you want people to know about you or your department or what's going on?
Well, when we circle back around and specifically the jail. When we talk about the jail, I've talked about efficiency and the new system as opposed to the linear laid out system and the benefits of what a new system is. The pod concept is a concept where the prisoner stays put within that pod. Everything comes to it. We can have classroom and programming. We have recreation, and I haven't even talked about the recreation. Each pod has its own recreation area where they have access to outdoor and light and see that. In our current jail, we have one outdoor recreation area where we have to take every prisoner from the housing unit out to the recreation yard, and that is not efficient whatsoever because I have to have staff watching the block because not everybody goes, but then I have to have staff moving them to that area and watching them in that area. Historically, years ago, we didn't have to provide, we weren't mandated to do outdoor recreation. Well, now through this lawsuit, they're expecting county jails to do outdoor recreation. And so that's just one of the things that has changed over time where a modern structure helps us with being able to meet those needs that the building and its physical layout prior, we didn't have those requirements.
Well, and I think something else that's key to that, and I see this as the county executive, it's really the safety of our confinement officers too, as well, right?
Right.
Every time we have to move an inmate today, because there is elevators and all that in this multi-story building, there's a risk to your confinement officers of harm, which it does happen,
Sure it does.
and, whether it's workers' comp or we see lawsuits, things like that, this new facility will really help mitigate that because of that movement of inmates like you've talked about.
That is correct. It also carves it up so the maximum number of prisoners in one housing unit will be 30, whereas now we have upwards to 80 in some locations.
Okay. Anything else you want to share with us, Sheriff? Well, it's been a pleasure to have you with us. Thank you. And appreciate you all joining us for this inaugural Talkin' with Turpin. We look forward to new editions of this, and thank you for listening and watching.